I finally rewatched Brendan Fraser's The Mummy after, I don't know, decades probably, and it holds up, really. I watched the first one, fell asleep during the second one, and ignored The Scorpion King entirely because, reasons. And I'm pretty sure, actually, I have never seen the third Mummy film, so that in and of itself is going to be its own bag of decaying mess. But the reason I've been watching these flicks is simple. I wanted to understand just how bad Lee Cronin's The Mummy actually was. And if you compare it to Brendan Fraser's 1999 Egyptian adventure outing, well, yeah, things don't look too rosy for Mr. Cronin. But I think there is an inherent problem with that overly simplistic comparison. And we only have to go as far back as 2017's The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise, to actually understand the conundrum here. Lee Cronin, like Alex Kurtzman before him, who directed the 2017 outing, he was never tasked with making just another Mummy movie. His goal was to reimagine the IP to be more sequel and franchise friendly. So, on one hand, this is good. 1999's The Mummy is, well, it's kind of peak, so why remake it? We also only have to look to The Mummy Returns to see how thin the traditional Mummy lore is once it is stretched out over sequels. Seriously, how many times can we resurrect this dude, go through all of the exact same motions to defeat him, and then still produce movies people want to watch? Four times. Actually, because apparently they're working on another sequel with Brendan Fraser, which is also part of the reason why Lee Cronin's The Mummy is called Lee Cronin's The Mummy in the first place. So that right there is the premise here. Lee Cronin's take might be bad, but compared to what exactly? And to answer that, we have to understand the terms of the assignment. My name is Crumbine. I am a writer, filmmaker, and storycraft enthusiast. This is Emergency Creative, a place where I explore the choices that shape media and how that same media can act as an irrigation engine for our imaginations. No curses here except the four-letter kinds. Shit! Fuck! But there will be corpses. Specifically, all of the corpses of the failed Mummy franchises. Yeah. Okay, so first off, Lee Cronin's The Mummy is not a proper Universal release, despite Universal still owning a stake in this iteration of the IP. It is complicated, and these are actually reshoots to clarify my script because it's complicated. Crucially, the blueprint that Lee Cronin follows was established by the prior releases of 2020's The Invisible Man and 2025's Wolfman, which those were Universal Pictures. Lee Cronin's film follows the exact same strategy. Smaller budget, smaller scale, fresh reimagining, just through a different studio. And of course, all three pictures are Blumhouse productions, so the continuity is there. It just really is a legal quagmire, but it does start with Universal. And here's what Universal Studios does understand. An ancient corpse wrapped in toilet paper is visually iconic, but the traditional Egyptian template runs out of gas pretty damn fast for modern cinema and all of the franchise sequels the machine of capitalism demands. The traditional narrative is restrictive, forcing a script into an ironically small sandbox where everyone is already intimately familiar with practically every single grain of sand. Archaeological digs, ancient tombs, sandstorms, curses. It is a sandbox that 1999's The Mummy proves is fun to play in, but really only once or twice every few decades or so. Because at its best, all you can really do with that premise is refresh it with modern filmmaking techniques. And like I said, the one from 1999 still holds up, so what the hell is the point in remaking or rebooting it? I'm seriously asking. So how does Lee Cronin solve this problem for Universal and Blumhouse and New Line? Well, sadly, the same way Alex Kurtzman tried to solve the problem. They irrigate the imagination by swapping the subgenre entirely, allowing fresh, if not innovative, ideas to take root. Both Cronin and Kurtzman swapped sandboxes to solve the sequel problem. Kurtzman famously tried to boot up an entire Dark Universe franchise, a kind of universal monster version of the MCU. This was dumb and also very bad. Cronin learned his lesson from Kurtzman and went way smaller, building on his work with Evil Dead Rise to craft a more authentic horror flick that takes cues from the possession, psychological, and body horror genres. Cronin abandons the traditional ancient Egyptian lore, instead building a story around an ancient Egyptian demon that needs to be trapped in a human body and then imprisoned inside a sealed sarcophagus. Similar, but different. The seal gets broken, chaos ensues. I think this is a genuinely clever way of solving that Mummy sequel problem. A demon that can possess any random body opens this world up to endless possibilities without losing that core Egyptian DNA. Cronin's monster is a demon possession wrapped in toilet paper, cosplaying as a mummy, but as a premise, it does actually kind of sort of work. The scale of the movie becomes smaller, the stakes become more intimate, and look, I genuinely enjoyed the reimagined mechanics of the Mummy's curse, how she recruits other members of her family to spread her demonic virus. Natalie Grace plays the titular mummy here, a young girl returned to her family after being abducted years prior. She is the absolute highlight of this film, delivering a physically unsettling performance. As always, hate the game, not the players. And Grace's turn in the Mummy franchise is, well, in my opinion, I think it's an impressive line on her resume. Likewise, the actress playing her younger sister, and the first to get cursed in the movie as the mummy builds its cult, she also delivered a fantastically creepy performance. The movie swapped genres, so we're playing in a horror sandbox here, complete with body horror gore. It is practical, it is unapologetic, and I admittedly even had to look away during that toenail clipping scene. So if you are a fan of visceral human discomfort, there is plenty of stuff for you to enjoy here. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good film, right? Swapping genres does result in collateral damage, and the most obvious are audience expectations. If you call something The Mummy, you can't blame audiences for expecting all the exact same Egyptian adventure tropes that say the 1999 film represents so damn well. I'd say if there is one major problem with Lee Cronin's The Mummy, for me, it is actually the sound design. I have never been so annoyed by such try-hard horror sound effects. Audiences are not supposed to be distracted by these things. But if there were two major problems with Lee Cronin's The Mummy, the second one would be the damn movie title. The studio is stuck in a catch-22 of their own making. They needed a fresh take on the material in order to irrigate the franchise, but they can't change the title. Otherwise, they lose the franchise momentum, the value of the franchise in the first place. Yes, it is dumb. I do not agree with the choices, but it is important to understand the nature of these choices. If Cronin was free to call this film literally anything else, the film would have played better with audiences who were not expecting another Brendan Fraser sequel. But because that title card reads The Mummy, it creates this gaping maw between audience expectations and reality that the script itself struggles to bridge, resulting in a flick that feels a lot like a modern Evil Dead outing wrapped up in toilet paper and cosplaying as a mummy. I should put a little dinger up every time I make that cosplay reference. I want to take a very brief sidebar here to acknowledge last year's Wolfman. Directed by Leigh Whannell, this objectively follows the exact same franchise irrigation premise. And we can see Universal's strategy for their iconic monsters IP start taking shape. Following the total and abject failure of the Dark Universe, Universal decided to go small and intimate. This started with the 2020 masterpiece that was The Invisible Man. Then we got 2025's Wolfman. That wasn't quite as masterful, but I maintain that Wolfman is pretty damn good for what it is, a modern reimagining that scales things down in order to allow for more creative flexibility. Wolfman also pulls off some very, in my opinion, very interesting creative swings with how the transformation takes place, both in sound and visual design as we begin to explore the world through that canine perspective. In my opinion, the movie is worth it for that alone. But again, like Lee Cronin's film, Whannell's Wolfman was still burdened by audience expectations. And at the end of the day, it just didn't, it didn't look like a classic Wolfman monster romp from Universal. Okay, so we have established that Lee Cronin's The Mummy it's actually a decent answer to the studio's sequel and franchise problem, but that doesn't necessarily make it a good film, despite some key performances and well-done practical effects. Like I already said, the sound design is very try-hard and very distracting. But then you also have the logic gaps where the script starts collapsing under the weight of its own aspirations. Katie, the titular mummy, is recovered after being missing for years. She's found in this ancient sarcophagus. She's catatonic, gray-skinned, and literally rotting. But no. Actual medical professionals just send her home with her parents because, I don't know, love is the best medicine? What? No quarantine, no government intervention, no intensive therapy, physical or psychological, at an institution designed to support such extreme cases of fucking trauma? Personally, in the context we've established here, I respect and I do like this more grounded take of the Egyptian demon versus a 3,000-year-old mummy. But that grounded logic still needs to be consistent throughout the runtime of the film, and it is very much not. And when this smaller, more intimate scale runs 2 hours and 14 minutes, 10 whole minutes longer than Brendan Fraser's The Mummy, well, this doesn't help audiences buy into the radically fresh take Lee Cronin is trying to pitch. This movie is indeed a flawed, loud, and barely disguised possession romp that is in endless conflict with its own branding. It then trades the seeds of genuine psychological dread for tired, gross-out shocks amped up by that try-hard sound design. On the other hand, Cronin's film is the work of an actual genre director taking a legitimate R-rated, practical effects-driven swing at a legacy concept in honor of Universal's new guidelines. Instead of launching a cynical, dark universe, Cronin focused on small-stakes, visceral horror, even if he recycled his old Evil Dead Rise tools to build it. The effort is respectable, unlike the corporate-designed focus group to death, horribly miscast Tom Cruise outing. Seriously, I watched that movie, the 2017 version that was supposed to launch the Dark Universe. I watched it just to contextualize Lee Cronin's film, and it wasn't even worth it for that. Jake Johnson, who I legitimately didn't even know was in this movie, he was an actual standout performance, and I kind of feel bad for him. He landed this co-starring role in what looked to be a massive blockbuster. Like, the dude already had a decent career, but if 2017's The Mummy had landed differently, it could have launched Johnson into some big-ticket movie roles. Oh, and Russell Crowe was in it as Jekyll and Hyde. Honestly, the Dark Universe premise is interesting, much the same way the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was interesting. And I would be genuinely, perhaps a little morbidly, curious to see what a second film would have even looked like. But good Lord, was Tom Cruise awful. At no point in this movie did I remotely believe him as this lead character. And that is the big takeaway here. Lee Cronin's The Mummy might be bad, but look, it will never be as bad as 2017's The Mummy. While both films share similar studio guidelines, albeit at different scales, Lee Cronin takes an honest swing at a genre he's already familiar with, and he delivered a film with at least a few redeeming qualities, burdened primarily by Universal's self-imposed no-win catch-22. But at the end of the day, as always, art is subjective, and that is my take. I would love to hear from you. Did Lee Cronin's possession pivot keep your imagination engine running, or did the title itself make you feel like a victim of a creative bait and switch? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to see how I navigate these same storytelling stakes without all those studio mandates, be sure to check out my own feature film. It's called Upgrade Not Found, and it's right here on YouTube. I also have novels and audiobooks. Links for everything are in the description. Like and subscribe if you like liking and subscribing, and until next time, stay creative, friends.